Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. We are going to announce a significant case this morning. Before we do, I'm going to take a few minutes just to introduce the folks who are standing up here with me this morning. My name is John Horn. I am the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. We have the pleasure of welcoming this morning Leslie Caldwell, who is the Assistant Attorney General of the Department of Justice and the Chief of the Criminal Division up in Washington. The Criminal Division is where the section for the organized crime and gang section within the department, and Jim Trusty, who was with us this morning, also is the chief of that section. So that's why we partnered with them in this case, and that's why we are very happy to have them join us this morning. Also up here is Kim Dammers, who is the Assistant United States Attorney, who is the lead prosecutor in the case. I have with us Britt Johnson, who is the Special Agent in charge of the FBI field office here in Atlanta, as well as his Assistant Special Agent in charge, Doug Korneski. And we also have Jeremy Baker, who is the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI in Memphis. We have Veronica Hyman-Palat, who is the Special Agent in charge of the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigations. We have Deputy Chief Sean Jones from Atlanta Police Department. We have Major Paul Garucci, also from APD. We have Chief Jimmy Conroy, who is the Chief of Police in DeKalb County. And we also have Robert James, who is the District Attorney in DeKalb County, as well as Antonio Veal, who is an Assistant DA in DeKalb. We have James Bergman, who is the Director of Special Operations for the Georgia Department of Community Supervision. And we have Ricky Myrick, who is the Director of Investigations for the Georgia Department of Corrections. We also have Paul Turner, who is a major in the Gwinnett County Police Department. Have I missed anybody? Did I catch everybody? I think that's everyone. So we are all glad for our partners to join us here this morning. Today, we are announcing the takedown of a 3-year investigation of significant components of the Gangster Disciples criminal organization. Earlier this morning, a judge unsealed a federal indictment charging 32 defendants with racketeering offenses that involve murder, extortion, robbery, carjacking, drug trafficking, and even credit card fraud, and alleging that these 32 defendants represent the leadership of the Gangster Disciples organization, not only here in Georgia, but members holding national positions of leadership in the gang as well. The indictment alleges that during the last few years in Georgia alone, the Gangster Disciples committed 10 murders, 12 attempted murders, 2 robberies, carjackings, trafficking in heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, extortion of a rap artist, credit card fraud involving losses of up to $450,000, and even the involvement of a local police officer who reported on the activities of law enforcement to protect other members of the gang. Now, this is a national takedown. Arrests are occurring in cities in 8 states, and another indictment that is being unsealed concurrently with ours today is being unsealed in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Memphis, Tennessee, charging another 16 alleged Gangster Disciples members. The Georgia indictment includes charges against alleged gang members in cities across the state of Georgia, including Atlanta, Decatur, Stone Mountain, Marietta, Valdosta, and Macon, as well as cities and states across the country: Birmingham, Alabama, Denver, Wichita, Kansas, Chicago, Detroit, Madison, Wisconsin, San Jose, California. So far today, we can announce that there are 30 of the 32 who are charged, who are in custody. They will be, many of them will be having initial appearances today in the courtroom of Federal Magistrate Judge Janet King. 3 of the defendants are in state custody, and they will be brought over later, and 2 remain at large and are being sought. Now, this multi-state effort resulting in the indictment today is the result of extensive cooperation and partnership between federal and law enforcement throughout Georgia and throughout the country. The partnership includes the U.S. Attorney's Office here in the Northern District of Georgia, and of course, Department of Justice's Organized Crime and Gang section, the FBI, IRS Criminal Investigations, the United States Marshal Service, United States Postal Inspection Service, and a host of local law enforcement partners, including the Alpharetta Police Department, the Atlanta Police Department, Clayton County Police Department, DeKalb County Police Department, Forest Park Police Department, the Georgia Department of Community Supervision, the Georgia Department of Corrections, Gwinnett County Police Department, Marietta Police Department, and some of our friends in the district attorney's offices, including Cobb County District Attorney's Office, the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office, and the Bibb County District Attorney's Office down in Macon. Now, today's indictment alleges that the Gangster Disciples is a violent gang that began in Chicago in the 1970s after the leaders of two different Chicago gangs, the Black Disciples and the Supreme Gangsters, joined forces to create the Gangster Disciples. So over the last 30 years, this gang has grown into a very sophisticated and national criminal enterprise that operates in neighborhoods and in prisons around the country, including now a large presence here in Georgia. According to the indictment and current estimates, the Gangster Disciples are active in criminal activity in over 24 states. And as the indictment alleges, this is a highly structured organization. The gang members are organized into geographic groups known as counts, and they have regular meetings to collect dues, to conduct the business of the gang, and to plan their criminal activities. Local groups of the Gangster Disciples receive instruction and other information from the gang's leadership nationally. The gang is led by a national chairman, as well as by a national board and regional board members. And they're responsible for coordinating the activities of several states. So-called governors control the activities in specific states where the gang has its activities. Notably, today's indictment here in the Northern District of Georgia includes several who we allege to be national officers of the gang, including a board member, the former national treasurer, and the current governor of the Western United States, the current governor of the southern states in the United States, and several current governors who head the activities of the gang in Georgia, Alabama, and Kansas. Now, it's a fairly lengthy indictment, so I'm just going to quickly summarize some of the charges. The primary charge in this indictment is a RICO conspiracy, a racketeering conspiracy, involving 30 of the 32 defendants. And as I said, the violations run the gamut from murder, attempted murder, robbery, extortion, carjacking, drug trafficking, and the indictment goes further to allege specific overt acts that we allege to be activities in furtherance of the Gangster Disciples, including a July 2011 shooting and murder in a drug deal / robbery that went bad. The shooting and attempted murder of a 17-year-old who simply walked in front of a video shoot and was shot because he was wearing the wrong color t-shirt. The shooting and murder at a bar in Macon, Georgia, that left 3 dead. And the shooting of a member of a rival gang on the orders of a Gangster Disciple leader who instructed the younger member to conduct the shooting simply because that younger member didn't react strongly enough when he got into an argument with someone else. And the indictment alleges the senseless violence, it occurred against even other members of the gang themselves. The indictment describes how some of the primary activities of the gang are to protect themselves not only from rival gangs and police, but also to enforce the gang's own rules and punish harshly those who break those rules. They accomplish these actions and this punishment and enforcement through notorious groups that are identified in the indictment, such as the Hate Committee or the Black Team. And members of those committees would just as easily shoot and kill a member of the Gangster Disciples who didn't follow instructions quickly enough or who didn't pay enough money into the box. And I'll point out that the indictment includes charges against a former DeKalb County police officer who claimed that he killed people for the gang and who was instructed to find out what the police were investigating. And in response, he warned other gang members to stay away from a certain place where police were investigating. There are several other charges in the indictment. Those generally relate to substantive charges, such as a murder or attempted murder in furtherance of a racketeering conspiracy, substantive drug trafficking charges, and firearms charges. You know, Atlanta has historically been a place where people, the folks are resistant to the national gangs. There really hasn't been an incursion of national gang activity in Atlanta. But unfortunately, today's indictment shows that this landscape has changed for the worse just in the last few years. The Gangster Disciples really are only one of the national gangs who has established a strong foothold here in the Atlanta area and in Georgia. This indictment shows that within Georgia, the leadership of the Gangster Disciples, they resided mostly in the metro Atlanta area, but the overt acts alleged in the indictment show just how far the reach of the criminal activity and the impact on the community that this can have, not just in Atlanta, but throughout South and West Georgia and throughout the southeastern United States. These charges show how a national gang like the Gangster Disciples really can wreak havoc on communities across the country, with crimes that run the gamut from murder and extortion and robbery to simple credit card fraud. We hope that this indictment sends a message that to the national gangs like Gangster Disciples that Atlanta and Georgia are simply not a good place to do business. I will now introduce Leslie Caldwell. Again, she is the Assistant Attorney General for the Department of Justice and the Chief of the Department's Criminal Division.
Thank you, John. First, I want to note that we wouldn't be making any announcement here today without the very hard work and dedication of the law enforcement officers, both state, local, and federal, and the prosecutors who are all represented here standing behind me. So I want to thank them. This case really represents a team effort to bring to justice a very violent gang that's been engaged in at least 7 years' worth of sustained criminal activity as described in the allegations in the indictment. It is the very core of law enforcement's mission to ensure that people can feel safe in their homes and in their neighborhoods. And unfortunately, it's a very hard reality that many people do not have that feeling of safety. They don't have that feeling of safety because of gangs like the Gangster Disciples. As the indictment alleges, the Gangster Disciples victimized people in communities throughout the Southeast, including Georgia and elsewhere, for many years. The indictment alleges here in Georgia alone 10 murders, 12 attempted murders, and it also alleges that the Gangster Disciples would commit crime wherever they could find the opportunity, whether it was drug trafficking, extortion, carjacking, or various kinds of fraud, including bank fraud, insurance fraud, credit card fraud, and money laundering. As a former gang prosecutor myself many years ago in Brooklyn, New York, I know that these gang cases are very, very difficult to prosecute. I know that it takes many months, many years. Witnesses are very reluctant for obvious reasons, and the cases can be really difficult to put together. So that's why it's particularly important that the indictments today are really targeting the alleged leadership of the Gangster Disciples. There are a lot of people who are out there, particularly young people, who are willing to join gangs for the thrill of it and for the money that might come easily from criminal activity. But there aren't that many people out there with the wherewithal to run an organization like the Gangster Disciples. These are the people, the people who are charged in today's indictment are the kind of people who keep these organizations running year in and year out, generation after generation. So cases like this really make a big difference, and I want to congratulate everyone who worked on the case and who will continue to work on the case. These are very difficult cases to bring, but they're extremely important for the safety of our community and our nation. And it's really fitting that this case comes the week before we celebrate for the 50-plus years National Police Week, in which we recognize the difficult and dangerous work that law enforcement does every day. And I want to close by saying that on behalf of the Department of Justice's Criminal Division, we really appreciate what you do, and we understand that you put your lives on the line for us day in and day out, and we appreciate it, and we thank you for it. And congratulations on an extraordinary case. Thank you.
And now Britt Johnson from FBI Atlanta.
Good afternoon. The federal indictments and subsequent arrests announced today are a direct result of a 3-year multi-jurisdictional investigation led by the FBI Atlanta Safe Streets Gang Task Force in coordination with FBI in Memphis. The federal indictments, both in the Northern District of Georgia and the Western District of Tennessee, result in arrest of 50 alleged members or associates of Gangster Disciples from cities across the state, as previously mentioned by the U.S. Attorney, and throughout the country. The FBI believes that the Gangster Disciples have now fully established chapters in over 30 states across the country and are considered by law enforcement to be highly organized and sophisticated gang that implements operational security measures for its members. The sophistication of the gang can be seen through the use of tactics to minimize its appearance as a violent criminal enterprise. The Gangster Disciples, under the auspices of the growth and development concept, attempted to conceal the gang's criminal activity by using front organizations to legitimize themselves with the local community. This investigation has shown that members of the Gangster Disciples who were involved in community-based activities such as feeding the homeless, Stop the Violence rallies, and community fundraisers are simultaneously involved in violent criminal activities as well as narcotics trafficking and fraud. In one example, a defendant killed a Gangster Disciple recruit for refusing to attend a community cleanup. The targets of this federal investigation include violent gang members who lived and worked amongst Georgia residents, such as a former DeKalb County police officer. Some served as enforcement and cleanup crews for the gang. 9 such enforcers, known as the Hate Committee, who were sanctioned by and reported to the Gangster Disciples leadership named in these indictments, were charged separately in the DeKalb County indictment in September 2015. For their alleged responsibilities in 5 murders in a 4-month time frame. In addition, 28 members of the Gangster Disciples were previously charged in a separate 2015 federal indictment out of the Western District of Tennessee for violent acts allegedly committed on behalf of the gang. The efforts of the FBI and its law enforcement partners to disrupt and even dismantle this violent gang criminal enterprise known as the Gangster Disciples does not end today. But the indictments and arrests announced today clearly illustrate the problem and our collective efforts to address it. Thank you.
Now, Deputy Chief Sean Jones from Atlanta Police Department.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon. As many of you know, public safety is the #1 priority for the City of Atlanta Police Department. And it's comforting for us to be able to be here today with our law enforcement partners, knowing that they support us in our efforts of creating a safer Atlanta. You know, over the years, what we've learned in terms of investigating gangs is that they operate in a very complex network, criminal network that is. And as a result of that, our department, we understand the importance of collaborating with our partners and sharing information with them in all the people within the law enforcement community. So I think that these arrests that have been that have happened today by the FBI's Gang Task Force really highlights the crime-fighting partnerships of all of our agencies and our commitment to eradicating gangs in Atlanta as well as the metropolitan area. I believe that our partnerships with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney sends a strong message that the federal, state, and local law enforcement, we're willing to work together to eradicate gangs, and we're no longer operating in silos, and we're sharing information. And by sharing that information, we're able to achieve great results. For this reason, I want to thank our special agent in charge of the Atlanta field office, Special Agent Britt Johnson of the FBI, for allowing our task force members to work along with his FBI agents to be able to solve this crime. Also, I want to thank our U.S. Attorney, John Horn, for his concerns for public safety in the city of Atlanta and for his willingness really to prosecute these individuals for these alleged crimes that they've committed. And because of today's announcement, I think we can rest assured that it's safe to say that the citizens in our city can feel a lot safer as it relates to these individuals being in jail and no longer committing crimes on our streets. So I just want to thank you and thank all of our partners who have participated in this takedown of these individuals. So thanks.
District Attorney Robert James from DeKalb County.
Good afternoon. We are
proud to have worked with the Justice Department to help rid DeKalb County streets of these dangerous individuals, these individuals that are members of the Gangster Disciples and specifically the Hate Committee. These individuals are no stranger to the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office or the DeKalb County Police Department. I can tell you that we have indicted 9 of these gang members, these alleged gang members, and 6 of these alleged gang members for murder. We're glad to have helped our federal partners and DeKalb Police and also Atlanta Police in helping take down these alleged gang members. On a personal note, I have lived in DeKalb County for over a decade now, and obviously I currently reside there. Much of that time was spent living in South DeKalb, which is the affected area that these individuals really have a lot of their activity in. I know personally the effect that gangs like this, specifically the Gangster Disciples, have on parts of South DeKalb and Lithonia and parts of Central DeKalb. I've seen the effect that gang activity, specifically this gang, has had on our children, our youth, our schools, our neighborhoods. And what I can tell you is that they are organized and they are determined, but all of us standing here today together in unison, no longer in silos, sends a message that we are more organized and we are more determined. So on behalf of the 750,000 citizens of DeKalb County, I say thank you to everyone that took part in this takedown today. Thank you.
Chief Conroy, do you have? No? No? Okay. Anyone else? All right. Well, that's the extent of our prepared statements. We're happy to take questions if anyone has any questions.
Yes, Attorney Moore.
Yes, sir.
I was reading through the indictment, and it said that one of the defendants bragged that the Gangster Disciples had infiltrated police departments and parole offices. Do you think you're finished with these arrests, at least when it comes to these folks, or will there be more?
The investigation in this case remains ongoing. I can tell you that there will still be continued work as it relates to this criminal organization charged here. But we remain cognizant all the time of the potential for criminal organizations to penetrate into law enforcement or local law enforcement or federal, whatever it is. We have charged over the past several years in this office a disturbing number of law enforcement officers who have made the unfortunate decision to work with the people that they are sworn to protect. So I think while I hope that we can, through prosecutions like this and through taking other measures, we can reduce the incentive that a police officer would have or a law enforcement officer would have, but I think that is something we will remain vigilant about.
Yes. Talk about the number of arrests that happened in Metro Atlanta, in the Georgia area, as opposed to other parts of the country, and the number of leadership. Is it safe to say that the Metro Atlanta area has become sort of the new headquarters for this organization?
I think that would be a little strong to say in terms of Atlanta's role. What we have found and what this case, I think, represents is the establishment of the foothold that a gang like the Gangster Disciples has been able to make in Atlanta, where historically the gangs like this, or the Bloods or the Crips, they've just never really got much of traction locally. And this case represents that the Gangster Disciples not only has leadership positions here in the Georgia area, a large number of people who are willing to join the gang and be a part of the gang, but that the national leadership is paying attention to Atlanta as well. That those communications between the Georgia members of the gang and the national leaders are happening, and they're happening frequently. So if that answers your question. Yes.
Could the DeKalb Assistant Chief please tell us your reaction to one of your former officers allegedly being involved in this, and if you are concerned that many other officers are as well?
Yes. Thank you. Again, Jim Conner, I'm the Chief of Police for DeKalb County. I am saddened to learn that one of our former officers was involved in this investigation. But I do want to remind you that it was DeKalb County police officers who were involved in the investigation as well. There are bad apples in every organization. This was a bad apple, and we were saddened to learn of his involvement in this crime.
Was he terminated? The reason he was terminated or left the force? Referring to him as former.
Yes, he resigned while under investigation for criminal activity in October 2015.
How did his criminal activity come to light?
We received a complaint that he was using illegal drugs and called him in for an investigation and related to the use of illegal drugs.
Do you have any reason to think that may have spread to other officers, the activity may have spread to other officers within your department?
No, I don't have any reason to believe that.
So was Gumbs a member of the Gangster Disciples and then he became a DeKalb County police officer?
I think.
I'm going to defer to the U.S. Attorney for that question.
And the specific details about things like that are not set forth in the indictment, and we're limited to what's alleged in the indictment. What the indictment says is that he claimed to be a member of the Gangster Disciples and that he was participating and is charged with being a part of the racketeering conspiracy. And to answer your, just to add one final note on the questions asked earlier, we are always disappointed to see law enforcement brought into a case like this or in any of our cases involving corruption. That certainly is not reflective of what we encounter on a daily basis with whether it's Atlanta Police Department or DeKalb Police Department or any of our law enforcement partners, where day in and day out there are countless law enforcement officers who act with integrity, who, despite the fact that what salaries they're making, they are laying their lives on the line for our protection, and they do so with honor and with every respect for the job. So I would hate for an indictment like this to really paint the entire police department, because that's absolutely not the case.
Did they have any alliance with the Mexican drug cartels at all?
That's not anything that is alleged in the indictment, and I can't say anything further. Yes, sir.
Could you talk about the raid process as far as where you went, different homes, different areas, and if you can include the Birmingham area in that?
In terms of identifying specific enforcement actions that happened today, there were so many of them that I can't really get into specific details. I know that of the 32 that were charged, we were able to put hands on, put hands on 30 of them. Several of them were already in state custody, as I mentioned before, and they were arrested in locations throughout the United States. But as far as describing what specifically happened in Birmingham or any other city, I can't really get into that.
Can you talk about just what's in the indictment? You mentioned the extortion of a rap artist. I know there's a little more detail in the indictment. Just what's in the indictment, can you talk about that at all?
The extortion of the rap artist related to, as alleged, related to the rap artist purporting to be a Gangster Disciples member, and the members of the gang then extorting money or attempting to extort money from the rapper as a result of that. It doesn't go into a whole lot more detail than that, so I don't want to get into more of the details with that. I imagine it may come out later in the proceedings. The name that we as a matter of policy, we only identify victims by their initials, and so we don't identify victims by name.
What can you tell us about Larry Hoover, the so-called chairman of the head of the organization? Is there concern that there was he still had influence over this organization despite being behind bars?
Mr. Hoover is not identified by name in our indictment, so I'm reluctant to go into detail about facts that are not contained in our indictment. I think what the indictment shows is that the national leadership of the Gangster Disciples remains very active, whether they are out in the community or whether they're in prison. And so, speaking generally, we do have concerns about the continuing leadership of this gang and other gangs that continues while they're incarcerated.
U.S. Attorney Warren, what's the next step for these folks? You say some of them are in court today?
Some of them are in court today. Those who are, there's so many of them that the judge may have to schedule hearings over the next couple of days. Those who are in custody in state institutions, they'll be brought over by the Marshal Service, as the Marshal Service has availability to do it. And we will continue to look for the two who are remaining at large.
Last question is for DA Robert James. When it comes to a whole resource issue, I think you talked with our station CBS 46 a couple of months ago saying that resources is a problem, in terms of getting more gang members or alleged gang members off the streets. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yes, resources are a problem on the local level, and I think, our police chief, a lot of people would echo that, but I can tell you that part of the reason that we've had trouble getting resources in the past is that citizens have not understood or acknowledged that we, in fact, have a gang problem. When I first started as a prosecutor in DeKalb, and specifically back the early part of the 2000s, we had hybrids, we had young men that, made up gang names. Every now and then someone would be murdered, but it definitely was not something that you could call organized crime. Since 2002, which was my first year coming to the DeKalb DA's office, and after having become DA, we have had an influx of national gangs, and I won't, get into any detail, but they're there, they're operating, they're organized. However, the hearts and minds of individuals that, live, work in the county haven't necessarily caught up with the reality on the ground that we in law enforcement see. I expect that when that reality sets in, the funding will follow. It's not as if there's been no funding, but the problem is greater than the funding. But one thing that I am encouraged by is the partnership with the federal government, with various federal agencies, with other police departments inside of DeKalb, with DeKalb County Police Department, and also with police departments in other jurisdictions. And that's what we would call a force multiplier, and we're stronger when we work together.
With such a large organized group, are you at all concerned about retaliation against any of you?
Well, that's not something that, I would speak about publicly. Obviously, we all take different safety measures, but when you, whether you have a DA's badge or a police officer's badge or an agent's badge, when you decide to enter the career in law enforcement, you do so not for the money, but because you believe in protecting the public, and that does not come without risk. So, thank you.
Do you think you'll be able to leverage these 30 arrests into making more arrests? They will give up information?
We are always very enthusiastic about taking the case wherever it can lead us. And as I said before, our interest in the Gangster Disciples as an enterprise is not concluded by this announcement today, nor against any other national gang that's operating in Atlanta or in our district.
Could you touch on the involvement of Terrence Summers and Cleona Franklin?
I don't plan to get into specifics about specific defendants today. What we have as to each defendant is pretty thoroughly summarized in the indictment. And I think that pretty much takes care of the questions for the morning. Thank you again for joining us this morning, and this press conference is over. Thank you.
I'm sorry, real quick, could you just briefly say, I know for the raise, could you just mention some of the stuff that was seized?
Again, items that were seized, I know that there was money seized, there were gang paraphernalia that was seized this morning, but in terms of specific things, we'll put that out in later court proceedings.
Thank you.